Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to welcome you to our Biocoding Club webinar and to share a little bit more information with you about using our Biocoding Club curriculum. I'm super grateful for you for taking time to join us. I know, especially in August, your time is incredibly valuable. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Coffin. I work at the Broad Institute in the Office of STEM Engagement Initiatives. So in our office, the goal is to prepare the next generation of scientists by supporting students all the way up through early career trainees, both to enter into and to succeed in STEM careers. So my role is the program coordinator of K-12 school-based initiatives, and that means I'm bringing opportunities into schools by partnering with educators locally here in Cambridge, but also nationally, like with all of you today. Before this, I was a teacher for 8 years. I taught high school and then middle school. So our agenda for today is here. I'll tell you a little bit about the Broad Institute and the development of our Biocoding Club curriculum, kind of where it came from and what our goals are. We'll look at an overview of the curriculum together so you have a chance to decide what units feel really helpful for you, what you want to learn more about. And then we'll dig a little bit deeper into the details by looking at the lesson plans itself and some of the activities that are in the curriculum. And then finally, we'll spend time learning how to use Scratch and Scratch Classroom. So if you have not tried it before, you'll have a chance to try out block coding, see how the program looks from the teacher account. And this will be the last part of the webinar today. So if you are already familiar with Scratch coding, you can get everything that you need in the first half. If you have questions while I'm speaking, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to address them while you're saying them, or definitely before we shift over to the Scratch training. But you also have my email address that I sent you this link today, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So again, I work at the Broad Institute. We're located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston. And the Broad is an independent and nonprofit research organization, and they are working to discover root causes of diseases and then use that to develop interventions and cures and treatments. So what makes the Broad really special is that it's bringing together a community of researchers from across all different disciplines and from across partner institutions like Harvard and MIT, but also the hospitals in the Boston area. And so people here are working on really different things like brain diseases and cardiovascular diseases and infectious diseases and cancer. But the Broad was founded out of the Human Genome Project. And so there's a really wide variety of science happening here, but it all is connected by those roots in genomic medicine. Part of what made the Human Genome Project unique was the commitment to collaborative science and to making this new information that they were discovering publicly available as they were doing it. And so we try to continue that commitment to collaboration and to community by being a good engaged neighbor in Cambridge and the Boston area, as well as across the country. And so part of that was that in 2019, our office partnered with the Cambridge Public Schools to create this biocoding club. The curriculum that we've created ties to different research that's happening here, like DNA, neuroscience, infectious disease, but it was designed to be used with students in grades 6 through 8. So now we run the clubs locally in the Cambridge Public Schools, but we also publish our curriculum online and where you have found it. And so it's free to access for educators. And we have an educator program where we offer training and materials for club leaders every year. So when we created the club, we had several goals in mind between us and the Cambridge Public Schools. We wanted to increase student interest in pursuing STEM and increase access to STEM education. We also wanted to make clear the connection between computer science and biology and human health. So rather than computer science and biology as two distinct subjects, the way they might be taught during the school day, students have the opportunity to see that these skills are often used together to learn more or solve deeper problems. We also want to change students' perceptions of who scientists are and what they're doing. And we want to make students feel like they belong in the space. We want to make studying science feel accessible to them. We want it to feel approachable. But most importantly, they should have a positive experience. They should enjoy learning science. We use the curriculum with middle school students, and we know that this age can be really impactful on how confident and capable students feel studying science and whether they're interested in continuing their STEM education through high school and beyond. So our biggest goal is that they're having fun and they're feeling confident. We run the clubs locally once a week after school for about a semester, 10 to 12 weeks. So we might meet on Tuesdays after school this fall. And the after school clubs will meet for an hour, but the lessons were originally designed for 75 minutes. So it can be pretty flexible for however it fits you best. We always start the club with a snack so that students have some time to settle down and transition from the school day. But then all of the lessons follow this same structure of a hands-on activity and a related Scratch coding activity that both tie into some grade level appropriate biology concept. So the structure of DNA or good and bad bacteria that make up the gut microbiome or the spread of infectious disease. The hands-on activities are fun things like the strawberry DNA extraction or building neurons out of candy or playing card games. So you can see a couple of examples here. One, these kids are making slime. This is a hoop glider activity where students show evolution step by step by changing one little thing about the hoop glider. Here's the neuron model out of candy. Here's the slime again. And then these students are taking a look at the bacteria that they grew from doing a swab on either their arm or their cheek, which is part of the microbiome unit. The coding activities use Scratch block coding, and Scratch is a free online coding program. It's designed for kids, I think ages 8 all the way up through 16. So it's very approachable. It's really fun. It has low floors, so anybody can access it, but it has those high ceilings that allow anybody to still enjoy it, even if they have a lot of experience. Uh, so you can see some of these activities that students have done this spring or last year. It's not required to use the curriculum in this way. We run it as an after school club, but I've worked with teachers already who adapt it to use in the classroom and will pull certain lessons or activities that fit with their learning standards or their objectives. Teachers have said that they already do one of the hands-on activities, so they're excited to be able to use the coding activities that relate to something they already do. Other people have said they use it for a summer program or for a Girl Scout troop. So there's a lot that they can do, and feel free to figure out how this is going to best fit for you. Um, it does not have to be exactly an after school club structured the way that we do. It's available, it's there online, and we're happy to know that it's reaching students in any way. So if you're using it for something different, if you have a new idea, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to email me so we know how to support you and make sure that it's fitting you well, and we can hear about it. So we're going to spend a few minutes now just going over what these 5 units that make up the curriculum include. I'm going to share the link to the curriculum with you now in the chat if you want to open it up. We're together just going to look at a quick overview, but if you decide you really like the way some of the units sound, you can dig into them a little bit more on your own. The curriculum has 5 units right now covering different themes that are all related to the work done at the Broad. So we have a microbiome unit, infectious disease, evolution, neuroscience, and DNA. The way that we do it in terms of pacing is grouping the microbiome and infectious disease units together because they're both a little bit shorter. We do DNA on its own because it's already 10 to 12 lessons, and then we group evolution and neuroscience together. But again, we do that because we use it locally with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and so spreading it out over 3 years allows students to participate in the club all 3 years of middle school without then having to repeat lessons. Each of the lessons has all of the directions for the hands-on activities and the Scratch activities, so everything's prepared for you. And for a quick overview that I'm about to share, I can also give you a link to just a one-page document if that's easier to follow along with. So this would be the microbiome and infectious disease units. You can see that it starts off with an icebreaker, just a first day of the club, getting to know you activity, and then they do a scratch activity coding their name. We make slime in the microbiome unit, and then they code a little bacterium on Scratch. And then they do the bacteria plating activity, which you can see here in the picture. So they actually get a chance to swab. Usually we do either your arm or your cheek and then smear it onto the plate, grow the bacteria over the course of a week, and then the following week actually get to take a look at it. They do a see, think, wonder activity with it. And so that's a really cool opportunity, I think, to have as a middle school student. While they're working on that, they're also starting to code a maze and then can add bonuses and traps to their maze. So the last activity in the microbiome unit is modeling the gut microbiome. And so in this activity, the students get a little plastic baggie with different pasta shapes in it. And so the pasta shapes represent different good and bad bacteria that are in your gut. And the curriculum has a guide to what diet would cause which shapes of pasta to show up. And so the students can use that guide to identify what kind of diet the person must have had for this plastic bag of pasta to represent their gut microbiome. I do like to point out that the microbiome unit is the only unit where the scratch coding activities build on each other. So every other unit each week is a new activity, but in the microbiome unit one, they code a maze and then they add a character that runs through it and obstacles and bonuses as the weeks progress. So I think if it's an after school club, sometimes attendance fluctuates. And so it's just helpful to know that in advance. But then it goes into the infectious disease unit, and that starts off with making origami frogs. They model the spread of infectious disease using little cups of water that a couple kids will have something acidic in. And then they walk around the room and pour water into each other's cups to model the spread. And then at the end of 2 rounds, they'll have a chance to use a pH indicator and see who has gotten sick. They learn how to code a conversation on Scratch. There's a game of vaccine ball, which is a lot like dodgeball, except that some students are vaccinated and so can defend themselves. They learn how to use cloning on Scratch. The hand washing lesson lets students play with Glow Germ, which is a lotion you can buy that will glow under a black light. And so they like to smear it all over their hands and touch each other and touch their desks. And you have a black light flashlight and you can see the germs show up. And then they have a chance to wash their hands, and it's a good check because when you shine the flashlight, you can say like, "Oh, you've still got some in your fingernails." So that's a good lesson to learn. Then they actually get to make a game using the cloning that they learned the previous week with flying germs. So it's almost like a Flappy Bird game. And then they get to play with a Rubik's snake, which is sort of like a Rubik's cube, but in snake form, and design a trivia quiz relating to infectious disease. All of the units end with between 1 and 3 lessons that are just set aside for students to work on Scratch projects. And that can be something that they're continuing from a previous lesson. That can be something that they come up with on their own. If you're using it in the classroom, maybe you've got something specific in mind. But it's a fun way to give them a little bit of freedom with the coding. So the DNA unit, again, on its own is 10 to 12 lessons. So this one is longer and starts off the same way with an icebreaker and coding your name. We'll actually try out the coding your name scratch activity later today. The kids play bingo together based on their traits and then are able to code their own traits. They do a strawberry DNA extraction, which you can see them trying here and get a chance to use the pen extension on Scratch. They make slime again and code a conversation. They model proteins using pipe cleaners and then can actually do an interactive chat. So rather than between two characters on Scratch, it'll interact with the user. I think they make a knock knock joke with that. They model DNA, and that's out of candy. That's out of Twizzlers and different colored mini marshmallows. And they code a game of hide and seek. They do a chromatogram and code a race, which we'll look at today. And then they do popsicle stick DNA sequencing and code a game of Mad Libs. And then the last one is a marshmallow bug traits activity. So given the two parent bugs and which traits are dominant or recessive, they are able to make then a little baby bug um, out of marshmallows and other candy. And then the last two units that again we group this way, but you can use however you'd like, are the neuroscience and evolution units. So with neuroscience, they model a neuron out of candy and cookies. They play pin the tail on the cat, which is just pin the tail on the donkey, but with the scratch cat. And with that, they're coding a neuron blaster game. They make optical illusions on Scratch. After looking at optical illusions together, they play a memory card game and then code a memory quiz. Then they learn about personalities and the big five characteristics and make a personality quiz on Scratch. They do taste tests when they learn about vision and taste and finish up and then have a chance to give each other their personality quizzes. And then they do a tangram puzzle with a partner that teaches them about mirror neurons, and so they come up with a mirror game on the neuroscience. Um, so the microbiome maze connection is really just the bacteria that they make that goes through the maze. So some students will make a closer connection than others. Some of the lessons have a closer connection, I guess, with the scratch activity and the hands-on activity, and sometimes they're less connected. For example, like the evolution unit here with the history of life, they make a timeline and then they have to come up with a timeline quiz. But you're right that the maze and the microbiome might not feel as natural. The next things with this evolution unit, they come up with family trees. The feeding simulation is fun. It's a lesson on natural selection. So they get a plate of beans and have to try to pick up as many beans like to eat as they can with a fork and then with a spoon and then with a pair of chopsticks to compare how those different adaptations might help or hurt them. And then they switch, instead of using beans, they use pasta. And so how might a different tool help with a different type of food? And then they play a card game, which is sort of like apples to apples, but with different adaptive traits. So given a certain circumstance, what would it be helpful to adapt to here? And then they learn about microevolution with those hoop gliders that we saw in the picture earlier. So I know that's a lot of information. I think that it's helpful to see a little bit of what's happening in each of the units so that you can take the time to go back into the curriculum and read more closely about things that might connect well to what you want to do. And we don't have time to get into every little detail of everything. But our curriculum's also growing, so we're working to develop extensions for the units that exist already. Currently, there is a 5-lesson extension to the microbiome unit that uses the Lego Spike Prime robots. So that one's a lot of fun if you have access to the Lego robots. But I've also been partnering with the Vertebrate Genomics Lab here at the Broad to develop an extension to the evolution unit that introduces students to the idea of Python coding instead of the block coding, and allows them to work with real data from the lab. So that's been a really cool opportunity. We're hoping to trial it locally this fall and then hopefully publish it formally sometime next spring. So we'll look closely at one lesson together just to give you an idea of what the lessons look like. All of the lessons in the curriculum will follow this same format, but I'd like to be able to see what this is going to look like so that you know what you're getting into. So for example, this lesson is from our evolution unit. It's lesson number 3, and it's about natural selection. You can see it starts off right away with the objectives. Usually there are 2. So one that's related to the hands-on activity, and then one that will be related to the scratch activity, the bio, the coding. It has the vocabulary words with definitions and then framing questions for the lesson, followed by a list of materials that you'll need for that lesson. They tend to be pretty good about numbers, so they'll tell you you need one of these per student, or you'll need a whole set of these. Within the activity, it also includes a preview script, which you can use. You can adapt if you know that you are using it in your classroom and you want to make a connection to something else, or you need to focus on something that's more aligned with a standard. But it already exists and it is there to give you a good starting place. Then it walks through the details of the activity. So the lesson plan is obviously designed for teachers. You're the intended audience, but it walks through, tell the students that they're going to pretend to be a type of animal. And so I think it's really helpful. And they usually include some sort of debrief as well. So you can see the script here includes language for processing the first part of the activity and then getting into the second. The lessons also include the scratch activity, and all of those include an example, which I'll show directly to students. I think it helps them to see what they're trying to do. And so you can see here, there's a link to a sample activity, which you can project for kids to actually click on and interact with. And then it also has facilitator tips. I think the facilitator tips are really helpful, especially if it's new, you haven't done it before. For example, in this lesson with the evolution adaptations, it says students might not know how to use chopsticks. So prepare to teach them to use chopsticks or buy the kind that are already attached. I know, for example, in the slime lessons, it mentions that an adult should be the one to put the food coloring in. And so we can all imagine how they learned that lesson, and it's nice to share that knowledge so we don't have to do that on our own. Depending on the lesson, it will include any accompanying worksheet or printable resource that you need. So, for example, in this evolution unit, there's a timeline and a family tree activity. So those are printable. Sometimes the lessons will include a link to like a helpful video. I know the microbiome unit includes a link to a video that kind of visualizes what are good bacteria and bad bacteria. Usually it's like a TED Ed or something very helpful and appropriate. I don't think that there are activities that really require more than one adult. Obviously, it can be helpful to have another adult in the room. In any case, when you're working with kids, in case there's an emergency, I've found that doing it after school, like anywhere from 10 to 15 kids is ideal, but I know we've had larger groups than that. We'll sometimes bring in scientist volunteers, so we have more adults in the room. And we obviously have the teacher in the classroom as well. So it's hard for me to say what would be an ideal number if you're the only one present. I know that people who do it in the classroom with obviously 30 plus kids are in a different situation. But I don't think there are activities that really require too much adult help other than like, again, like dropping food coloring in the slime that you're making. Um, and there are things that I would prepare ahead of time if I knew that I was the adult leading it and there weren't other adults in the room. Like if we're doing the strawberry DNA extraction, I might make slides that have the instructions so that everybody can see it all at once and I don't have to worry that people are going ahead. So obviously it can be adapted in whatever way is helpful. I'm glad. All of the lessons also have these scratch cards. So these have scratch coding instructions for the students with like clear visuals, just of screenshots of the blocks to use. So when I'm leading the club, we'll print these out and laminate them and just hand them out directly to each student. I think they're really helpful because the visual means that students can work pretty independently with the coding. With Scratch, there's multiple right ways to do something. There's lots of ways that they can meet the goal of the assignment, but the Scratch card provides kind of one way of doing it if they're not sure how to get started. So let's take a look at one of the activities that we do with students. One of the activities from the DNA unit is this lesson on DNA sequencing. So how do we read DNA? And it starts with an introduction. So all of your DNA makes up your genome, which is just the instructions for building you. This is something that probably comes in the middle of the unit. And so a little conversation like this would be a good way to remind students what they were working on last week, who can remind me what we've been talking about, what does DNA do? Does anybody remember what your genome is? But there are 3 billion letters in the human genome. And so to put that in context, you would need to read all 7 of the Harry Potter books over 600 times through. The Human Genome Project, which was actually starting to sequence the DNA of a human, started in 1990, and it took them 13 years and $3 billion to fully sequence that DNA. So we want to know how they did it. We took the DNA and we made a whole bunch of copies of it, and then cut those copies into little pieces. The little pieces are easier to manage, just like most things, right? And then you can sequence those smaller pieces. And so they were able to sequence the smaller pieces, which means they were recording the A's, the T's, the C's, and the G's. But then they have to put them back together, right? It doesn't mean anything if they're split up into little pieces. And so to put them back together, they look for where the DNA sequences overlap. That helps put them in the right order, right? We know there are multiple copies. So once the smaller pieces are in the right order, then we can read out the whole sequence. So this is an activity that students do as part of the DNA unit. They get these on popsicle sticks to physically sort them. But for today, we have this digital version, and I'll actually give you a link if you want to make a copy of this and try it for yourself. But feel free to just watch me do it. So I have these 6 popsicle sticks, and I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the DNA sequencing on the previous slide, which is I'm going to look for where these overlap. So I noticed where the letters overlap here. There's an E, A, R, N, I, N, G, and I can match these. And I can just continue to see where these overlap and line them up. So I think that it can be difficult to read these out if you have them all stacked like this, even once they're in the right order. So I think it can help to write them out without the overlap in just one line. So I might give students scratch paper just to try to write this out. But then you can see it says, oh, I love learning about science. We've made these cards or these popsicle sticks for students in Spanish. We've made them in French. So it's pretty easy to adapt this activity to any group of learners. And this is what the part of that lesson plan looks like for this activity. So you can see it has that background information, the script about what is DNA sequencing, and the language for explaining the activity to students, the line about Harry Potter that I gave you. The activity actually has 3 different example phrases. So we did the first one, I love learning about science. The medium level says humans share 60% of their DNA with a banana. And then there's a challenge level that says the human genome has 3 billion DNA letters. The lungfish genome has 130 billion. And that one has so many zeros that it makes it actually really difficult to solve the puzzle. I think one of the popsicle sticks ends up being just zeros. But that ends up being a really good conversation for students about like what could make sequencing the human genome really difficult. So this is kind of the bio part of the curriculum. So we'll shift gears and take a look at the coding piece and the Scratch next. Scratch is a coding platform. It's developed in the MIT Media Lab, and it's designed for kids ages 8 to 16. If you're not familiar with it, chances are some of your students are. I know that my students were using Scratch to play games and using Scratch to code, so pluses and minuses. But it's a block coding program, which means that instead of having to write out text, the text is already written for them, and it's grouped together in blocks. So students can just drag and drop the blocks. Unlike text-based coding, which can be difficult to learn because they have to memorize a lot and everything has to be really precise, and like missing a quotation mark somewhere can keep the whole thing from running. There's not the same room for error with the block coding. So with Scratch, Everything is already written for them, and students can really focus on kind of the main idea, the logical thinking, and problem solving. It's very visual, and they can usually pick it up pretty quickly and then see the results of their work right away. So we can do it in the half-hour section of class and have something at the end of it. Scratch says that they have low floors, wide walls, and high ceilings, and I find that that's pretty true. My favorite thing about using Scratch with students is that it allows them to be really creative, and I don't know that we always think of coding as a creative outlet, but we'll give students the same assignment during a session, and we get back completely different projects at the end. So I'll show you an example of some student work in just a minute. But I want to highlight a couple of resources that we have for Scratch because I know that for some people, the idea of coding can be an obstacle or intimidating at the at least. But all lessons have the Scratch card that I showed you and a sample activity. And students can work pretty independently with these two resources. So the Scratch cards are just embedded right in the curriculum. They have the instructions and they'll walk you through steps like 1, 2, 3, 4. And they have pictures just like the Scratch coding platform screenshotted right there so they know what they can look like. The sample activities are linked in the curriculum. I'll usually just click on it, project it in front of the class before I send them to work. And it's a really good way to see what can we do. There's also a way on Scratch that you can click on the sample code, see inside, and see the code that's built into it. So not just what should the output look like, but if it's more complicated, you can see like what does the actual code itself look like. But in my experience, some of the students are brand new to this, but a lot of students have used Scratch before, if not a lot before. So it's a great opportunity to rely on student expertise. If a student asks a question and I don't know the answer or I can't figure it out, I can ask another student who is a Scratch expert to come and be a helper. So it's a nice way to encourage students to be collaborative and to highlight students' expertise. So this is one example of a Scratch activity that's in our curriculum related to sequencing the human genome. So in this lesson, the students learn about the Human Genome Project, which works to sequence a DNA for the first time. And the Human Genome Project was working collaboratively, and they were publishing their findings immediately. So they figured something out and it went online. So at the same time, a competing scientist formed a company to also try to sequence the human genome and do it faster so that he was able to patent it. And so the lesson includes a link to a TED Ed video that gives a little bit more information, more detail on the story. And then they do a hands-on activity where they try to write out a DNA sequence before anybody else in the class. And then the Scratch activity here, they're coding a race game. So all lessons, I said, include a sample code. So we'll look at the sample code to demo the project. This is called Off to the Races. And so when I click the green flag, it starts. It says press L to make the Human Genome Project go. So when I press the L key, you can see this truck goes. Press A to make the Solera truck go. And you can see that by just pressing the keys, the different trucks are able to move forward. They have these cool DNA exhaust trails behind them. And then when it hits the finish line, the background changes. So students have quite a bit of a task here, right? The lesson also comes with the Scratch card. So this is the Scratch card that accompanies this lesson. It walks them through those steps, right? Step 1 is to create 2 racers that move forward when you press a key. This is one way of doing that. So they can create the different racers, and then this is a way that they can code it so that when the L key is pressed, it'll move forward. Then it walks them through how to make the different backdrops. So they need to have the finish line and then one for each winner. And then how to code it so that when the sprite reaches the finish line, the backdrop will switch. The second page adds in that DNA exhaust trail. And so this, it says, is the challenge. This is kind of the next level. But it does explain how to do it. It shows you exactly which blocks you would need to do it. So despite getting the same instructions, seeing the same example, there's a lot of room for students' creativity. So I want to show you just a couple of examples of student work. This is from last fall. So this first one is a little bit more basic. They've got the two characters. They both move. So when I press E, the centaur moves. And when I press the M key, the little scratch cat moves. So that's a big piece of the race. But you can see that they didn't quite get the background finished in time because it already starts off saying that the Human Genome Project has won. This second project, when I click go, I still have the two cars, but you can see that up in the top, these students actually have ways to track the speed. So as one car goes faster, the speed increases. As the other one is slowing down, you can see it's decreasing. And then when it touches the end, they've got the background all figured out. And then finally, just one other one. So in this case, the student made this one so that the Human Genome Project truck actually moves on its own. So rather than being in control of both cars, you're only in control of one. And so it feels a little bit more like a race. And instead of using a key, it says put your mouse over the green circle, and it says don't lose. So in order to make the truck go, I have to mouse over the green circle. Oh, and I made it. And this student also does have the DNA exhaust trail. So there's not one right way to solve the problem or to complete the activity. We've had students who will get really into adding sounds or who draw their own characters every time. And it's really fun to see what they come up with when given the same assignment. So before we try a little bit more of using Scratch ourselves, I also want to show you how it's set up for classrooms and for educators. Again, it's designed for kids, and so part of that is making it accessible to use in classrooms. And so they have Scratch teacher accounts. So as an educator, you can request an educator account, and that gives you a little bit of control over using it in your class or with a group of students. So it allows you to make the students' usernames and passwords for yourself, which I think is really helpful because one, you know all of the names are appropriate, you know all of the names are safe, and two, you have all of the usernames and passwords. And especially if you're running it as a club once a week, the students forget their passwords. You don't have to worry about spending time resetting them. You just already have them. You can create classes. So if you're using it during the day and you want to separate students by class period, you can do that. If you want to separate students by what semester the club is meeting, you can do that. And then within the classes, you can group projects into studios. So you might have one week that is the Human Genome Race Studio. And that allows students to kind of stay a little bit more organized, but you can also share the sample projects. And so if I had shared the sample project of the human genome race that I showed you, students would be able to get inside and see it. And so if they're brand new to Scratch, it gives them a little bit easier of an in. My favorite part is that students can share their projects when they're finished. So I like to save a couple minutes just at the end of each club meeting so we can project what they've been working on. It's fun for the students to see the different things that their classmates have come up with. And it's fun, especially some of the activities are interactive, like it's a game or it's a Mad Lib or a knock knock joke. And so it's fun to go through them all together. I will send you the link now if you want to register to create an educator account. It'll prompt you to come up with your own username and password. And Scratch, I will say, is really particular that your username does not contain any personal information. So it shouldn't be your name, it shouldn't be your school or part of your email address. Mine is just like Biocoding Club. They say that they will delete your account. I haven't tried it, but I don't need to try it. They'll send you an email quickly to confirm that it's your email address. And then they say it can take up to a day to approve the account. So if you don't do it now, that's obviously completely fine, but just know to plan to give yourself a little bit of time before you try to do it with students. And I will also share a link to a resource page that Scratch has for using these teacher accounts. The teacher account will look just like this. You can see that I can still, if I want to code, just click create along the top toolbar here. But it gives me all the access to my classes. If I want to add a new class, I can just go into my classes and then click new class. And within that is where you're actually able to add students to the class. You can just upload an Excel sheet full of usernames and passwords. And I'll use like BioCoder and then just number them so that I don't have to worry about students using different names and anything else. So before we shift gears to using Scratch, I just want to highlight our Educator program here. The Educator program is a sponsorship program. And so every spring we have an application process and educators can apply to run a biocoding club like this at their school or other community organization if you're not in a school. It includes a curriculum workshop that's really similar to this. And then we'll actually mail you materials to facilitate hands-on activities for one or two of the units that you can do with students. And at the end of the semester, we send the educator running it a stipend of $1,000. So again, the typical timeline is an application sometime in the spring so that over the summer we'll meet and prepare you for the new school year. So if you want to set a calendar invite for March of 2026, we'll be ready. The second half of our session today, we're going to shift gears and do a Scratch training. So I'm going to pause here before we move on, and we are going to shift over to learning how to use Scratch. So if you're already familiar with Scratch, feel free to sign off now and take some of your time of August back. But we're going to try out some of the basics with using Scratch and a few of the pieces that kind of make up some of the activities within the curriculum. That's a good question. Somebody asked, are there videos from Broad scientists for each unit? And I don't have those yet. It's something that I've thought about because one of the benefits of running the clubs locally is that we can bring scientist volunteers in. I know that we're collaborating really closely with one of the labs right now to create our extension unit. And so we're going to have videos from that lab for that extension unit, but I think it would be nice to obviously include that aspect of it with anybody who's using the curriculum. Is the curriculum free? Yes. The curriculum is free and it is just a PDF. It's available online anytime. So that link that's on the slide right now, broad.io/biocoding curriculum, will take you right there. It is literally just PDFs. This is what that page looks like. If you scroll down, it will show you each of these units and you can just open them right up. So a few different people asked similar questions. Can parents and students use this curriculum? And absolutely, the curriculum is available and it's posted online. Anyone can access it and use it. If you're a parent at home and you want to use it, you can go to this website and find it. If you're a student and you want to start a STEM club at your middle school, that's fantastic. I assume that through your school, you'll have to find some sort of adult to work with you. But the curriculum itself is always available. We use the club locally with middle school students. So I've only used the club with sixth, seventh, and eighth grade students. The question is, what is the lowest grade we've done it with? I think you could probably do the activities with younger grades, but you might have to adapt the lesson and some of the maybe preview information just to meet what students' background knowledge is coming into the activities. All right. If you are sticking around and you want to try out Scratch, I recommend or I encourage you to open a browser window and follow along with me. But if it's easier to just watch, that's fine too. I do think that Scratch is helpful to kind of play around with. It's definitely intuitive, but I think you'll feel better after you've spent a little bit of time trying it for yourself. So we will start off just doing the first activity that we do with students, which is to code your name. So if you want to join me, just going to scratch.mit.edu. And you don't need to be logged in. If you have an account on Scratch and you want to, you can log in, but you don't need to log in order to join it. All I have to do to get started is click the Create button at the top. So when I open up Scratch, this is what the actual coding page looks like. And you can see the top toolbar has space to title the project if I'm logged into my account because I'll be able to save it. It also has under settings a whole bunch of different languages. I think there are over 70 languages. So if students are English language learners or speak another language at home, this is a great way to allow them to feel included in the program. Don't feel like they have to be an expert in English in order to participate in the club. In order to save, they have to go into File, Save. My preference is to have students share. So again, if they're part of our class, that big orange button right in the middle will share their activity with the whole class, and I get to see it at the end, and I can share it with everybody in the last couple of minutes. But if they don't, File Save works. So a lot of students are familiar with Scratch already and have used it before, but for students who have not, then it's still pretty intuitive. You can see that this coding space is all on the left and center of the page. The left has all of these blocks, and these are literally just drag and drop. So you can click on them and drag them right into this center space, which is the scripts area. That is what will make the character do what you want it to do. So the codes are broken up into these different categories that are all separated by color to keep them organized. So for example, the motion ones are here in blue. You can scroll all the way down and see the looks ones are purple. There are sound ones in pink that in a busy classroom I usually don't bring up, but if they have headphones, I don't mind. There are events in yellow, controls in orange, sensing in this kind of teal, operators in green, and variables in orange. And you can click right back by just clicking through the colors if you don't want to scroll all the way through them. But the drag and drop, I think, is really helpful because it eliminates any issue of a typo, right? If you're dealing with like text written code, you have to type everything out. Any little mishap means the whole thing won't run. And with block coding, you just drag and drop. So the stage is this section on the right where everything will happen. So whatever I code to happen will happen to this little cat over here on the stage. The Scratch cat is called a sprite, and it's just the character. The green flag will make the code run. So if I want the cat to move 10 steps, I can drag this move 10 steps block. But you can tell even from the block itself, there's a little like notch in the top. This isn't enough to get it started. So I need to go down to one of those events. I need something to trigger the cat to actually move the 10 steps. So I'm going to click when the green flag is clicked, move 10 steps. So now when I come over and I click the green flag, the cat moves 10 steps. That's it. The sprite is the little cat, and he'll do what I tell him to do, right? He can do any of these moving around, changing outfits, whatever we want. And he's going to do all of that here on the stage. The stage is a coordinate plane, so X and Y coordinates, right? Left to right, and then up and down. 0, 0 is the center. So right now, when I'm clicked on the cat, the sprite, you can see that X is 10 rather than at 0 because he moved 10 steps to the right, but the Y is still 0 from when he was centered. The Y is a little bit shorter than the X because it's a rectangle, so the Y goes from negative 180 to positive 180. The X goes from negative 240 to positive 240. The size is in percent, so when I'm clicked on this sprite cat, the size is 100%. If I wanted it to be smaller, I could change it to 50%. If I wanted it to be a lot bigger, I could make it 500%. But 100% would be the starting size. And then the direction is which way he's facing. So direction of 90 degrees is facing forward. But I could rotate him either by playing with this little circle. You can flip, or you can actually change the number written here. The cat is not the only character, right, that I might want to code with. So the cat exists here, but I can also choose other sprites. When you hover over this little cat, choose a sprite comes up as one of the options. There are other options to paint your own sprite, to surprise you, or to upload a sprite. I usually stick with the sprites that Scratch provides. I think they've got a lot of good options. I find that uploading can kind of be a little bit fuzzy quality. And painting is difficult, though I have had students who will always create their own characters, and that's a very cool way to approach Scratch. But you can see that there are a lot of really funny options for students when they're choosing a character. Some of them are real people, some of them are animals. It's a bowl of cheesy puffs. Some of them are cartoons, some of them are real. And all the way at the bottom are a whole bunch of letters. So to try this out, we're going to do the first activity we do with students, which is to code your name. So I'm going to start with B for Broad. And you can see that when I go ahead and add this new sprite, the B shows up down here highlighted, and the B shows up in this corner because this is where I'm coding for the B. I'm going to get rid of the cat because the cat is not part of the word Broad. So I can go ahead and delete the cat, and I have B. So again, if you want to try and follow along, I think that this is a helpful way to practice. But if it's easier to just watch what I'm doing and then try it again another time, that's okay too. So I've got this B here. I'm going to start with one of the motions. I'm going to make it turn 15 degrees. So just like with the cat we saw earlier, I need to have some event. It's not just going to turn. So I'm going to go to the events, and I'm going to drag over when the green flag is clicked. And the blocks click right into place. So when the green flag is clicked, it'll turn 15 degrees. So that was kind of exciting, but not that interesting, right? When the green flag is clicked, it turns 15 degrees, but that's it. If I scroll down to these controls, you can see I have the option for this forever block. And so sometimes if my code isn't really as exciting as I want it to be, I can add this forever block, and that's going to make this rotate, right? This turn 15 degrees continue forever. So now when I click the green flag, this is going to turn 15 degrees forever. I can change 15 degrees to whatever I want it to be, right? Maybe I want to slow it down, so I'll change it to just 5 degrees. And this really works with a lot of the codes that we have. So maybe I come all the way up to looks, and instead of turning, I want to change the color. So I'm going to also include it in the forever because I want it to continue changing. And I'm going to change the color effect by 25. Just like with the angle, the turning, I can make this change colors a little bit slower by changing that number. And so now the B is rotating and it's changing colors forever. If I want to stop the code, if it starts to make me dizzy, I can click the red stop. But then as soon as I want to start it again, I'll click the green flag and it will go. So let's keep going. Let's add R. So I'm going to go back to choose a sprite down here. And I want to go all the way down to the letters. So let's grab this one. When I have multiple sprites on my screen, right, like I do now with B and R, I'm only coding one sprite at a time. So the B has these code blocks that I've already used to make it turn, to make it change colors. The R, when I click on the R, doesn't have anything. The R is not doing anything. You can tell which sprite you're working with based on which one is highlighted down here, but also based on what is up in the top corner. So when I'm working with R, the R is in the top corner. So there's another way that we can change the appearance of the letters that we're working with, and that's with the costumes. So I'm going to see that in this looks switch costume. So just like with the move, with the change color, I need to have some sort of event to kick it off. So this is also going to be when the green flag is clicked. I want it to switch costumes. So let's look at the costumes. When we come up to the top here, there's code, there's also costumes. And so when I click on costumes, you can see that the R shows up multiple different ways. I have this green R, the way we saw it originally, but I also have this orange R that's more of a shadow, right? And this blue R, it's a little more straightforward. So students can change these, they can edit these. One thing that I'll recommend is right-clicking on it and then duplicating it, because if they do something that they don't like, it's a lot easier to start over again and just go back to the beginning than it is to have to try and undo everything. But you can see there's all these paint tools, there's text tools, and so there is a lot they can do. It's just a little bit clunky. So now if I click the green flag, oh, is it already R3? Let's switch to the next one. So when I click the green flag, it switches to the next costume, costume 2. If I change this to 1, when I click the green flag, it switches to costume 1. Again, sort of interesting, but not very exciting, right? It's only happening once. So instead of assigning it to just one costume, I can change this to next costume. And so now it will rotate through. So instead of switch costume to a specific one, I'm going to go this next costume. And I'm going to do the same thing we did before, where I want this to keep happening. But now if I click the green flag, it's cycling through those costumes so fast. So I can slow that down. It doesn't have the number the way that the B code with the turning and the color effect did. So I can just add this wait block, and it'll wait 1 second before it cycles around to go to the next costume. So as I'm kind of playing around with this, you can see that all of the blocks for the code I want already exist. And there's lots of different ways that I can change the letters to do things that I want them to do, to make them appear different colors, to make them appear different places. And so I think that it's fun to see some of the different things that you're able to do, just to know that they are options. But don't feel like there's one right way to do things, or there's something that you really need to be able to do. So let's add the next letter. We can click stop if we want. And we're going to go back where we've been going the whole time. So choose a sprite. I'm going to go all the way down to letters, and let's grab O. So O, instead of changing the color, let's change the size. So I want to change the size by 10. Remember, the size is given to us in percents. So the original size is 100%. If I change the size by 10, it's going to change it by 10%. So it's going to get 10% bigger. I still need that green flag. I still need some event to start it. So now when I click the green flag, the B is still doing its thing, the R is still doing its thing, and the O got 10 bigger. So if I click it again, it'll get 10% bigger again. If I click it again, it'll get 10% bigger again. Okay, but I want it like the other things to keep going. So let's make it forever, change size by 10, but then so it doesn't just keep growing and growing and growing, let's change the size by -10 so it gets smaller again. If I click the green flag, nothing happens because I'm changing the size by 10 and then I'm immediately changing the size by -10. And so just like we did with the R, we're going to have to add something in the middle to wait. So now you can see it gets a little bit bigger. It waits and then it gets smaller. If I add another weight in there, you'll actually be able to see it wait on both sides, right? It gets bigger, it waits, it gets smaller, it waits. One thing that you might have noticed is that it did not go back to its original size, right? I had increased the size by 10 a couple of times before I used this forever block, and it did not go back to the original size. It stayed at that larger size. So if I want it to go back to the way it was before, I can add set size to 100% just right at the beginning. So now when I click the green flag, it's going to go back to the original size. Now it matches a little better with the other letters I have here. And then it does the forever, change size by 10, wait, change size by -10, wait. So then let's try another activity that is a little more fun as we start to get into the games. And you saw a little bit of this with, I think, with some of the student examples. So I'm going to choose a sprite. I'm going to go down and I want to find the letter A. Let's take this one. So with A, rather than change the color or rotate like I've been doing, let's actually have A move around. So one of the tools that can be helpful with Scratch as students start doing things like making games, like where they have kind of a Flappy Bird game or a hide and seek game, is having the sprite follow the mouse pointer. So we still need an event. So I'm going to take that when the green flag is clicked. A will go to the mouse pointer. And you can see that A went right to where the mouse pointer is and then stays where it is. We still need that forever around this go to the mouse pointer. So now if I click the green flag, A is going to follow the mouse wherever I go. I can bring it back to where I want. If I want, there's also a way that you can make this just point toward the mouse pointer. So if I don't want it to follow me around, but I do want it to point to the mouse pointer, I can do that. And so now A is staying where it is, but it's following the mouse. One thing to just keep in mind is that remember that 90 degrees facing forward is default. So I think especially with the letter A, which I kind of want to act like an arrow, it's just good to keep in mind that it's going to face the facing forward is going to be what's facing the mouse. Let's add the letter D. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to choose a sprite. I'm going to go to letters, and then I'll add the letter D. And one of the other things that shows up a lot we see in a couple of different units is a conversation. So I'm going to scroll down to looks, and you can see that right away the first one under looks is say hello for 2 seconds. So when I'm coding D, I want D to say hello for 2 seconds. It needs to do that when the green flag is clicked. And now if I click the green flag, the D says hello. Which is sort of interesting, but it could do a little bit more, right? Maybe I want the R to say hello back to the D. So I want R to say hello also, but rather than just saying hello at the exact same time, right? When the green flag is clicked. So now if the green flag is clicked, they both say hello at the same time. I want it to feel a little bit more interactive. So I'm going to make this so that when the green flag is clicked, the R will say hello for 2 seconds, but then it's also going to broadcast a message. It's going to broadcast the message, hello. So R is going to say hello for 2 seconds, which we can all see it doing. It's saying hello really for our sake. But it's also going to broadcast the message hello. We can't see it doing that, but that's happening kind of on the back end. Now, if I go over to the D, it says say hello for 2 seconds, but rather than doing that when the green flag is clicked, I want it to say hello when it receives hello. So R is broadcasting a message. D is now responding not to the green flag being clicked, but to R saying hello. So let's see what this looks like. R says hello, and then a couple seconds later, D says hello back. This can be kind of fun, not just for one letter saying hello to the other letter, but some of the activities have students make conversations. So they will tell each other a knock-knock joke. And so it can get a little bit fun going back and forth for a little bit. The last thing that I think is really fun with this activity where you're coding your name are the backdrops. So down here, right next to the choose a sprite, if we go over 1, is this choose a backdrop. It has a lot of the same options, right? You can paint your own, you can surprise me, you can upload something. But for now, I think the easiest one is just to choose a backdrop. And you can see, just like with the sprite characters, there's lots of options. Some of them are cartoon places, some of them are pictures of real places, some of them are just patterns, and like this one. And so now I don't just have my name doing all of the different things that I coded it to do, but I have it doing all of those different things on this backdrop of a stage at a disco party. You'll notice that there is this sound category. The students have a lot of fun with it. I don't like to use it or to demo it intentionally with students because I think when you have 10, 20, 30 kids in a room, if all of their computers are making noise, it is a little bit overwhelming. But it does exist and they have a lot of fun with it if it's something that you're open to trying in your classroom or if they have headphones. Some of the more advanced activities will involve students using these more advanced features like sensing. This gives them a chance to, for example, in the one that we saw where the trucks had to race to the end, and when they reached the finish line, the background changed. Those would use the sensors. You can see that one of the options is touching a color. There are operators which will let you combine different things. But really, I think Scratch is a pretty intuitive tool, and students will feel comfortable when they have a chance to use it. And with those Scratch cards and with those sample activities, it's something that they can usually figure out pretty well on their own, and start to try more advanced things as they get more comfortable. So that is a very basic introduction to Scratch. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you found the curriculum interesting and helpful and are able to try it out with students.